Hi everybody, welcome to episode 2. Today we're going to talk about how to properly set up your digital files for your comics. I'm going to be using Adobe Photoshop, but this is going to apply to anything that you might be using, whether it's Clip Studio, Procreate, you name it. The concept's going to be the same. I'm going to start off by opening this 6 by 8.5 inch page here, and what I'm going to do is just kind of go through the anatomy of the page, and then we're going to go through the motions of actually setting up the page from scratch. So opening this up, you're going to see there are 3 areas sort of highlighted here. The magenta area is called the bleed. The bleed is extra art that goes to the document edge. So this is a 6 by 8.5 inch page. The actual dimensions of the page are actually wider. So it's actually 6 1/8 by 8 3/4. So the reason for this is that this extra art is there for when the book is trimmed on press. We don't get any, because there can be variants, like the blades that are actually cutting the pages. They're pretty exact, but they can move around a little bit, and you don't want any white, page white showing if the art is right up to the edge of the trim. So we create a little bit of extra, so if the blade varies a little bit here, we don't get any sloppiness. The blue area is what's called the margin. The margin is basically defining the active area of your page. In the active area, you want to keep that consistent throughout the book. It's clean, it's professional, and you don't want it to look sloppy. So you want to set up the rules of like what your margins are going to be. And in this case, this is a pretty standard set of margins to maximize your real estate in the book. A 1/2 inch along the top, a 1/2 inch on the outer edge, and a 1/2 inch along the bottom is about standard, because that will also leave you space to put page numbers and things like that. On the left here, because this is a right-hand page, the left side here, this is the inner margin. And it's the inner margin because this is where the gutter is, or the spine. So this is the side that's going to be glued together or sewn into the book. And when that happens, there's actually a little bit of a curve. There's a little bit of an arc here. And so you want your gutter or your inner margin to be around 0.6 to 0.7 inches. That's pretty standard because you don't want the inner margin to get so big that it starts getting into your active area, but you don't want it small where your information is going to get lost in there. So really, your active area for your comics is going to live in the yellow area. Can the blue area have art? Absolutely. You can absolutely have art in the blue area. You just want to make sure that it's not important dialogue or important focal point images. So when some people like working in spreads, and the spread document is going to be the same idea in that you're going to be creating 2 pages together, except in this case, you are going to have a bleed on both sides because it's a spread, and you're going to be marking the middle of the page with a guide. So you'll have your dimensions. In this case, it's supposed to be a 6 by 8.5 inch page. In this case, it'll be 12 1/4 by 8 3/4. So the spread document is going to be in essence the same thing. You just want to also make sure that when you are defining your guides, make sure that you're giving the proper gutter space on either side here. Okay, so we're going to create a document from scratch. So I am going to open up a new document here. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, you'll notice that the dimensions are not the exact trim size. It's the trim size plus the bleed. So I'm doing a right-hand page again, which means it's going to be 6 1/8, the trim plus an 1/8 inch bleed by 8 3/4, the 8 1/2 inch trim plus a 1/8 inch bleed on both sides. Now I'm going to zoom in here to make that nice and big. Now, I like to set the ruler at 0 at the upper right hand corner because that makes things a little easier. And then once I do that, I start putting in my 1/8 inch bleeds on the top, outer edge, and on the bottom. Okay, so I think my outer edge one is maybe a little too wide. There we go. Okay, now if I reset my ruler then to the left corner here, then you'll see that I have my 6 inch by 8 1/2 inch page. Now I need to add my margins. So I'm going to go and I'm going to drag my inner margin to be more than the 1/2 inch. I'm going to do it at 0.625. And then I am going to do my other margins at 1/2 inch. If I can get them clean enough. There we go. That's good enough for this. There we go. And there we go. That is, now we have our active area defined, and we have our document with proper bleed. So the yellow area is showcasing our active area, and then we have sufficient margins and bleed on either side. So that's how we set up our files, showcasing our active area, and then we have sufficient margins and bleed on either side. So that's how we set up our files, and I will see you next time. Bye.